Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. My name is Anthony. I'm a 7th-year doctoral student in clinical psych, an addict and an alcoholic, another bozo on a bus, and I care about you.
And I'm LouiLou. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a former Miss Castro Country Club. I am in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol, and I am always in search of balance. And each week we will create and provide a space where we can engage in conversations around topics of recovery.
Our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to baffle us.
Absolutely. And before we do that, please make sure you like, share, and ding that bell.
Ding, 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 ding.
Exactly.
And now the disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on At the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The material and information shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we are just friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
Entertain. Like we're a bunch of flying monkeys.
Like we're a bunch of flying monkeys.
You know what's interesting? It's like you did that thing where when the sound was too high, like, you know, when you go to a concert and the thing was like, yeah, fix that. Yeah.
Y'all were like blasting me in my ears over
I
here.
know, exactly. I'm all, welcome to the CCC. I'm all, can you hear me?
That's what it sounded like. And like the music. Okay. Well, so, I'm glad we figured that
How
out.
are you doing? Let's start with you.
You know, if I'm being honest, so today I was at work and my boss asked me how I was doing, and I just like involuntarily started sobbing. I've been under a lot of stress. I haven't been feeling my best for a number of different reasons. Like life is lifing, you know.
Life is lifing.
Life is lifing. You know, there's a lot going on, and I'm feeling under resourced. But you know, I reached out to a bunch of friends yesterday, and I've been like staying in contact with people, and it's been really helpful. And what I'm realizing is that, you know, I just, you know, where am I trying to land? I think what I'm trying to say is that, you know, the solution remains the same. You know, like I've reached out for support. I'm slowing down. I'm taking things off my plate. I'm focusing. You know, I'm allowing for kind of the path to clear itself. But it's required that I like stop moving for a little bit to see like what exactly needs to happen next.
That's so fitting with our pixelation issue, huh? Stop moving.
Yeah. So for folks who've been watching us, you may have noticed that we've been pixelated in our footage, and we're not too sure what it is, but
we're gonna get to the bottom.
But if we stand still, you can see us clearly. So there are gonna be a couple moments where I'm just not moving.
Exactly.
How are you doing, Louis?
I am good. I'm good. You know what? Honestly, life is good. Work's going well. Like everybody else, I'm wrapping up commitments. What I love about me for recovery is, you know, seeing the things that I take on come to fruition, finishing them out. Because in active addiction, there's a lot of loose ends, things that I didn't finish. And it took a long time to learn. We talked about it last time, to learn how to trust myself that I was actually going to be able to follow through on things. I was going to comment. Last Thursday, I was fortunate enough to be interviewed by on a podcast, my alter ego, Many Happy Returns. It was on attributes, and it was Dragon Confidence, and it's called Mind Power Meets Mystic, hosted by Cynthia V and Michelle Walters. Sorry, Cynthia, I couldn't pronounce your last name, or I didn't want to mess it up, but it was a really nice opportunity to kind of have someone kind of share their thoughts and you know, their view of you and how you show up in the world, you know. And it was really just nice, and I got an opportunity to kind of share my opinions on things and celebrate some other folks. So it was good.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
that's good to hear. So today's topic is about interpersonal conflict. And the reason why we thought we would talk about interpersonal conflict, because it's one of the things that we hear a lot about in the rooms. You know, people are upset with friends, or they're upset with like the outcome of a meeting or the way a meeting is being run. But in the end, what we hear a lot of is that there's, you know, some tension around being around other people, right? And that's going to happen because if humans are being themselves, we're going to occasionally get on each other's nerves. So
absolutely.
So today's topic is about interpersonal conflict in recovery. And so when you hear about interpersonal conflict, do any stories come up for you right away? Like, Has there been any interpersonal conflict that you kind of seen a full arc with?
Well, I've talked about it at nauseam.
Oh, at work, the
At
work stuff.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Learning how to deal with folks who work in my department or who work coworkers who maybe in my humble opinion are not working up to their potential, and then learning how to kind of coexist with them without and not just because I think one of the challenges that I have with that is how you think if I look over there and I'm not paying attention to you that I'm not thinking about it, but that's not the case. I had to get to a place where I was like, okay,
Mhm.
make peace with they are not never going to work the way I want them to work, and that's okay. And it is not going to stop, alter, change how I do things because they are not doing what I want. So basically, what it comes boiled down to is it was a control thing on my part. And as much as I thought I had worked through that one area, it likes to come back every now and then. It's kind of like a reunion. Every now and then it's hey, I missed you. Let's now disrupt your life with a little bit of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My most recent conflict was with a really good friend. We were originally scheduled to go to Mexico City this year. I think it was this year, and I kept putting it off for a bunch of different reasons. Like I've been writing, and I was also concerned about like, was it financially feasible for me to do, given that like I was going to have to take time off of work in order to like get more writing done and all this other stuff. And in the end, what happened is, I had to bail
Uh-huh.
toward, and but it had been such a long time, and so looking back, I can see why she was upset. She had already put down money on things, and she had made all these arrangements, and there were plenty of opportunities for me to say like, hey, I can't go, and so I waited too long. And I think, looking back, I think a big part of that for me was I do think I wanted to go. I think to some degree, I think I was being unrealistic with myself.
Mhm.
And I think what I would have done differently in that situation is like in the very beginning, I think if I would have given it some more time and I've been real with myself, I would have realized, like I can't go. I think the other part of that too was like I just didn't want to upset her because she was very excited about all of us going to Mexico City, and so that played a big role. But in the end, my being quiet and my not talking about like what my limitations were and all of that, in the end led to money being lost,
Uh-huh.
and a friend being, hurt by my decision. Um, and
So
then
the
my,
irony is like you
Mhm.
trying not to create that kind of harm,
Yeah,
creating harm.
well, yeah, because sometimes I have, sometimes I have a hard time asking for what I want or what I need, and yeah, I don't know, that probably has its origins in my family. But normally that's what's been a source of conflict for me is like if I don't ask for what I want or what I need. And a big part of that, to be fair to myself, is that sometimes I don't know what I want or what I
Yeah.
need, and but I know, yeah, and so then that might be hard for me because one of the things I value is value connection, and I value
Yeah.
taking care of my friends, and I don't want to do or say things that hurt you.
Yeah.
So I might kind of prolong the inevitable. And sometimes I just get too busy,
Yeah. That's true. That's
because
true.
I'm trying to do too many things at once. And I think that was probably also what's happening there. But that's so, that was the last situation I was in. The way it ended, it was a little rocky. We had to have a couple of conversations. Feelings were still hurt in the end,
Uh-huh.
but we were able to get past it.
I would say now that's beautiful. It's like
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm always thinking with friendships, with relationships, or whatever. Forgiveness has to be a piece.
Mhm.
I'm not always going to do things perfectly,
Yeah.
but if I'm held to an reasonable, unrealistic standard, or you have expectations that are just unattainable, then that to me, like, you know,
Yeah.
it's a red flag, and I
Well,
get to run.
one of the things that I think is really interesting about like interpersonal conflict or conflicts in general is that they can be categorized, right? You
Yeah.
can have a conflict can be the result of an unmet need. It could
Mm.
be the conflict of a misunderstanding. It can be a conflict that's the result of competing values, right? So there are all these different ways that we can have conflict, and we see it play out a lot of the
Yeah.
times. Were you going to say something?
Well, no, I say, where does
Mhm.
it fall? Like, okay, so early recovery, when we're all finding our voice,
Mhm.
and we're trying to figure things out, and it's messy as hell. And that's when a lot of the issues that I've had where not understanding boundaries, not paying attention to boundaries, that and you know, kind of not you know what I'm saying. It's like
I
early
do.
recovery was a tough one because we're all kind of in this together, and ideally in a magical world we'd all be loving and understanding and say, oh, I get it, you're trying to figure out. But the best is having friends who, and we have a mutual friend who on occasion he will disappear, retreat into himself, whatever. And it's really not about any of us. It's about what this individual needs to do. And initially in the beginning, it used to be like, whoa, what's going on? Is this about me? It's about me. And then when I finally realized, no, it's not about me. It's about this person. And I get to decide if I want to accept it or not.
You're describing, I love what's happening right now because basically you're describing all the different ways that we can have conflict, right? We can have in interpersonal conflict, so between the two of us. We can have intrapersonal conflict, which is within us. We can have like intra-group conflict, so between groups, right? And what you're describing is a combination of, wait a minute, I'm having this conflict with this person, this is happening with this person, right? So this is a result of this. But part of this is like what's happening for me right now. It's like, wait a minute, is this me? Did I do something wrong? And so then you're kind of going through all of that, right? And when you break it down that way, you can see why things can spiral really fast between people, right? Because there's so many different things going on, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I think about when it comes to that person, and I think about being in recovery, right? So for me, as an addict and an alcoholic, when my alcoholism isn't checked, I'm selfish, self-centered, and egotistical, right? And so I'm going to even do that when shit is negative, right? So if we're having if you've disappeared, I'm going to, because I'm selfish, self-centered, and egotistical, I'm going to make that about me.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And but on my best days, you know, I might be able to say like, actually, wait a minute, no, this person, I've noticed this pattern, this person does this regularly, you know? And if it brings up feelings for me, and this is actually interesting because this is something I'm struggling with today, is not taking on the shit that other people do, right? Like we hear people say this all the time about like, you know, what other people think and do has nothing to do with me. That's like
we say it, but living it and really, yeah, it's
well, and then that's really hard, right? Because I mean, so my next question here is, I think a lot of what happens, especially in early recovery, is that when there is interpersonal conflict, there's a lot at stake. Right. On one end, it's like, I think physiologically, some of us are still kind of going through withdrawal. And so like our feelings are all over the place. We're probably not sleeping really well, et cetera.
Yeah.
We don't have alcohol or drugs to kind of numb ourselves. And so we're having to have our feelings. And for many of us, it's the first time that we're having feelings without something to kind of take them away.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that's on one piece, like there's like the physiological stuff that's happening. Then I also think like psychologically, there's a lot that's happening. It's like, what does it, like what I said, what's at stake? You know, when I'm having an argument at someone, what is making me angry? You know, for example, I'm trying to think of something. Well, does anything come to mind when you think about that? When like the conflict that's actually happening, if you kind of look at it, well, you were actually saying this earlier. It was about, you said you were being controlling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was being completely controlling. And while you were talking, I was thinking about something else too that makes interpersonal conflicts like tough. Early on, I needed to. I would, you know, it wasn't just enough that I knew that I was having a challenge with someone else. I needed other people to kind of co-sign or be a part of. And so I was taking temperature and bringing other people into it and making it grow and become more than what it was, and not really kind of like not really sing, you know, making a mountain out of a molehill, as they put it, or having something have a snowball effect, where it was like, it's kind of like the Real Housewives bullshit, where you didn't say hi to me over here, and so I'm feeling a certain way, and from that point I'm feeling that way, and you're an asshole, and you're the insensitive, and all, and that's really a lot of the conflicts early on.
Yeah, that's, and I think it still is now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, like I think, I love what you're saying because you're talking about these like very tender parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, one of the I'm like getting emotional because I've been thinking a lot about that recently, about how like they're like, there are these parts of myself that like I'm discovering along the way, and that part of what's been difficult about having certain conversations with friends and family is that like, this is the first time in my life that I'm like, when I'm having a feeling, I'm not like trying to run from it, so
Absolutely.
I'm choosing not to argue with you, I'm choosing not to like say the venomous things that may have like made me feel better,
Yeah.
and so like to arrive at a conversation with your guard down, without like a sword in your hand, like that is so hard. That is so hard. And often when I see people get into arguments, and it's like people that like they have their sword in their hand, they have their shield, and they're just ready to go at it, And oftentimes when I hear this kind of stuff going on, like underneath the surface, really what you have are like two people who are maybe like sad, or like they're feeling lonely, or what, you didn't say hi to me, and that maybe that fucking like that reminded them of being a kid and being neglected, right? And so like one of the things that I've been trying to get like in touch with recently that's been very difficult has been like my own sadness and my own pain, because like when I look at that stuff, I notice like I'm able to be a lot more forgiving to the people around me. But that's really hard, that's like it's hard to, sometimes I feel like it's hard to have empathy when, for example, maybe you never felt like you had empathy, like no one expressed that empathy to you, so like why would you know how to do that for someone else? Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is what I would say to a sponsee early on, especially like early on. You know what? Give me grace. This is where grace comes in. It's like it's going to be messy. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to get into situations like this. And I always ask myself how, and I think about these relationships. Are they important to me? Do I value this relationship? Do I want this relationship? And if I want this relationship, that means I got to do some work.
Yeah.
That means I'm going to have to put my tail between my legs and own where how I show up in this. And yeah.
Yeah, when you say work, I feel like that's man, like so I think for a really long time I've thought that like healthy relationships don't need work. I think I like I've man, I am a wreck today. I'm like, I feel like I'm like on the verge of tears.
This is some good stuff. I
It's
love
just
you. I
been,
love
yeah,
you.
I mean, it's just
No.
been, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this right now.
No,
It's been like, you're like, keep doing it. The ratings will go up. I'm just like, oh God, I've just been going through so much. I think, God, what I'm thinking about is like, so I've been under a lot of stress. And what I've noticed is that because I've been under a lot of stress, I haven't been able to like to show up to certain things the way I want to show up. And it's been like really difficult to like to not like be triggered or to be feel like pulled in different directions, and in a lot of ways, like I haven't felt like this in such a long time, and one of the things I'm really grateful for is like, oh God, I had a friend, such a sweetheart, like literally sat on the phone with me for hours last night.
Nice.
And like I was like ready, honest to God, I was like ready to go to the ER because I was like, I'm having a panic attack. I don't know what to do with myself right now. And it just, so this discussion is just making me think about how like I think at the root of like all like all arguments between friends, especially, well, the majority of them, it's like there's stuff going on underneath the surface, at least for me. Cause like when I'm at my best, like you can kick and scream and I'm still going to be able to be loving and caring,
Yeah, exactly.
But when like I'm not at my best, or there's like something really old that's like being touched, like that's really hard for me. I start to get paranoid. I start to think like you're lying to me, you're gaslighting me.
Absolutely.
I start connecting dots that don't need to be connected. And it's like it goes back to like one of the things, like Billy sends in his text message in his gratitude list, that everyone is doing their best.
Absolutely. That's all you can do. It's like the last agreement in the 4 agreements. It's like always do your best. That's it. And if all I can do today is not pick up news, that's it. A tool that I have gotten better at using is letting folks know when I don't have the bandwidth for anything. I usually like, it's not that I'm running from anything. It's just I'm like, you know what? If you don't give me this space, I'm probably going to create some sort of interpersonal drama.
Yeah.
You know, because I just don't have the wherewithal not to personalize, not to make this about me, not to make, you know, I'm going through what I'm going through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's like, it's why I think it's one of the reasons why we say in recovery that like it's contingent upon the daily maintenance of our spiritual program.
Mhm.
You know, it's like like I think about my recovery, and it really does take like, I really do need to stay in touch with people. You know, it's taken me, I've been in the program for over 10 years, 5 of those recently continuous. And I think about like, it's taken me literally what, like 11 years to figure out like, oh, actually I need daily medicine.
Oh yeah, no, exactly.
Literally, it's taken me 10 years to like stop fighting and to think to myself like, oh, actually, you know what, I do need to head a meeting. Actually, you know what, I'm going to reach out to other people right now. I think that's the other thing recently is that when I'm like kind of in my shit is like, I don't want to reach out to other people because it doesn't feel good right away.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed, at least recently, is like, even if it doesn't feel good right away, you do it anyway.
Yeah, you do it.
You know, like the benefits outweigh the downfalls, because it's like, I'm out of my head, I'm talking, there's someone listening to me. You know,
Exactly.
it's just a better place to be in. All of that to say that interpersonal conflict, in my experience, it starts, you know, it starts with that foundational stuff that we're talking about, which is like, what is going on for me?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, what is at stake for me?
Hmm.
Hmm.
No,
What are you thinking?
No, I'm thinking of at the you know, what we're talking about, it being at that level, because, you know, there were times where I would have been like, this could have become a gossip session.
About,
You know,
yeah, oh,
Like,
interesting.
it could
Yeah,
have
yeah,
it could
yeah.
have become a gossip session because I'm all this motherfucker, this whatever, instead of realizing that. And I think this conversation is where the empathy is, because there's something more going on. I mean, in the beginning I would not have been able to acknowledge that, but there's definitely something more going on, and it comes from, like, you know, when we go through our shit, you know how they say it's like, even the stuff that you think is garbage, you're going to be able to use that to help a situation. And so before, when I was stuck in my self-centeredness and not able to kind of get past it, because they say practice the principles all your affairs, but when you're in that shit,
Of course.
when you're
Yeah.
in it, it's like all that stuff goes right out the window.
Yeah. Oh
It's like,
gosh. Yeah.
I'll get back to you when I'm done feeling my stuff, you know?
Yeah. I think it's also interesting to me because of like the stories we can tell ourselves.
Mm.
You know, there's just so many. I'm certainly guilty of this. Is that when I'm feeling triggered, like I will like immediately start to like spin a story. And you hear this a lot with like sponsees who are in like the thick of it.
Yeah.
They're putting together this story, and you're like, girl, how did you make that leap? Like, how did you get from she looked at you this way, therefore she hates your family?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
maybe that's not a good example, but you
No,
know,
no,
see,
but it's not. It may not be a good example, but it is a good example.
yeah. Like and sometimes like I listen, and this is why I love when people come to meetings like raw and like are just
Mhm.
honest about what's coming up for them. Cause like to this day, I mean, I share about this at meetings all the time. I love it when a speaker goes up there, they have like 10 plus years and they're like, I feel crazy every day.
Yeah.
That,
Exactly.
oh my, are you kidding? Oh, that is like, I could live off of that. I always say I could leave a meeting right there and then. Cause I mean, that's all I need to hear. I just need to know that you feel crazy.
No, absolutely.
You know, and that there's like a solution to that crazy. And part of I think that solution for me is like not believing it. And part of like not believing it isn't believing that there's something bigger than me.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I sometimes do to myself is like, there are so many different ways to tell a story. Right. And one of the mistakes I make, okay, is if I'm in a conflict with someone, I go to someone who's going to tell the same story that I tell.
Yeah.
You know, this is someone who's going to co-sign my shit. Like just the other day, oh, God bless me, I spoke to someone who never has anything positive to say about anyone. And
Were you talking to me?
No.
No.
Yes, actually. No. No, I was talking to someone that actually you and I know quite closely and quite intimately. And everything out of his mouth was like feeding the worst parts of my brain. And I remember thinking to myself, Anthony, why do you ever talk to this person about things? Why do you ever? And it was like, I don't know what I was doing. I think to some degree I was like venting, but then when I caught myself venting, I was like, hold up, I am venting to the wrong person. This is not where you go for comfort or peace of mind. You know what I mean?
You were feeding that beast.
Oh my God, I went home and I like was spiraling. I was like, this motherfucker. But that's my own bad. Like, what was I doing? You know? Where was I going with this? Relationships. Anyway, yeah, being careful of like the stories that you're telling yourself and like who you're going to tell those stories to.
Absolutely.
You know?
So one of the categories that you were talking about before, and I think that I think about this one a lot, like when you're talking about your values. Okay, because I realize that in my recovery or in life, sometimes I got to make decisions about things, or I feel a certain way about things based on those values. And a lot of times, like when I'm talking about the actions, it's like they're actions that are important for me, and I have to take them, but they may not sit well with someone else. And I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm trying to think if I have an example. Like I'm very clear. Like there are things I don't like to do. I'm not going to do it. And if someone has a problem with it, like maybe you're never available. You're never available. Well, I'm as available as I'm going to be. Or if I don't like something and I'm able to express that I don't like something, then I can create some issue. I mean, where a person think you're a total asshole. But it's important for me. I am always thinking like, this is important for me to do, for me to work on my self-esteem, to work on my personal value or whatever. And I can't not do it because I'm so spending my time being concerned about if somebody's going to be bothered by it, you know?
Yeah, you know what you're reminding me of is all the different ways that we can have conversations with someone, right? Like they're different conflict styles, right? When I was in undergrad, I forget what the words were, but there was like, I studied rhetoric in undergrad. And like one of the things that we talked about is like, you can enter into conversations in one of two ways. There are many different ways, but you can enter into a conflict and with the idea that there's going to be a winner and a loser, or you can enter into a conflict with the idea that both people are telling what's true for them. And together you can take these truths, you can bring them together and you can have something that's bigger than yourself. Right. And I think the second way of entering conflict to me feels more God-driven. You know, that's very hard for me to say because it feels like there's something at risk for me, you know, like the thoughts and ideas that I have, they're probably protecting me. Right. So what would it mean to kind of like not be protected by that? Like I'm thinking of something right now. I'm like being careful about whether or not I want to bring it up. But, you know, I was talking to someone, this is someone very near and dear to me. I've had him in my life for years now, and he has a relationship to sex and sexuality that's very different from mine. And I've always appreciated this about him. I've in fact told him, you know, before, like, hey, like I want to try to experience what like it is like that you're like the way you approach sex and sexuality, right? And like yesterday we had a conversation, and part of it was difficult for me to hear because I was like, I was so baffled because I was like, how could you think those things, you know? And really what I was saying is, how can you not feel the way I feel, you know? And it made me think about like the ways that I'm like so careful because I'm like, I do not want to leave here being hella anxious. I'm already like falling apart. I'm like barely keeping it together right now. Like,
you're watching yourself.
But the point is that like that conversation made me think about the way I hold on to ideas. And I think that sometimes when we go into arguments with ideas that we don't want to let go, like that's where we can get into trouble. But I think the other side of that is like when we're not willing to try to take the other person's point of view. Like I can have the idea that I have, but I think we go a long way with someone when we can say like, actually, I'm hearing you. I know what you're saying and I get it, you know.
Yeah. Validate that the other person has a right
yeah,
to
you know,
believe
and
it.
even if that opinion is different from yours,
Yeah.
you know, even and you, I hate, you know, when we say we can agree to disagree, but we can agree to disagree.
Yeah,
and there has to be something. It's like that old saying that we hear in the rooms a lot. It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Right. And being right, I think, means it's having an idea and not willing to look at that idea in any other way.
Yeah.
You know, and being happy is you're choosing something bigger than your fucking ideas.
Yeah, it's
You
not-
know, like that's like one of the things that I think, one of the things that helps me when I'm feeling like the most conflicted is like, okay, for example, there was this one time years ago, I was just in this like horrible situation and I was very upset. And that very same day, I had to fly back to the East Coast. And I was in this fucking plane and I was a wreck.
I was in this fucking plane.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was in this plane and I was a wreck. And I remember looking out the window and there was this moment where I had a sense of relief because I thought, for a second, I am one person with these ideas, and below this airplane are like literally hundreds of thousands of people having their own experience. And so for a second, I think I was like humbled, you know, like my ideas are not the only ideas. And so I felt like there was something bigger than me, you know. And I think when we approach conversations, or I'll speak for myself, when like I can tap into that, you know, then there's little room here for us to cause more harm than needs to be caused. That's really hard. That to me is very difficult. It's difficult to get to that.
You just had a Bill Story moment, you know, when he talks about that old time in Westminster in the book, like where he's talking about where there's a period where he had one of those moments where he wanted God to be with him, and then it slipped away because of all the other minutiae or drama that comes into play. Yeah. So now it's just noticing that. Hey, so I have an example. Like, okay, so a couple of Sundays ago, I happened to secretary a meeting, or I was secretary a meeting, and it was an issue that had been building up. And there's a period in the script where, you know, it can get loud, and, you know, and what tends to happen is that you have folks who will take it upon themselves to try to quiet the meeting, and not in a graceful way. Hey, shut the hell up, you know, whatever.
This, yeah.
And it makes me uncomfortable. And it's happened in other meetings or whatever, but I haven't said anything because I didn't think that, you know, maybe it didn't matter or whatever the reason. And finally, I had talked to a few people about it and talked about how it made me uncomfortable, and how you don't know what somebody's going through and what kind of trauma they're experiencing. And also it can make this space that's supposed to be safe, unsafe. And it's a third step thing that you can do. Like, it's going to die down at some point and then be fine. So the individual said it. I said it in my role as secretary. You don't have to do that. You don't have to quiet people down. It is especially not in that manner. But I didn't leave it at that. I had a chance to talk to this individual after, and I told him, you know, I didn't say that because I'm trying to change your behavior or anything. I'm simply saying that because I care about you, and I don't want to have this become a resentment. It was already a resentment, but I need it to not be, because those are for us. Those are the types of things that can either cause me some real intense discomfort, or it can take me out. And I was able to kind of, there was no salvaging of the relationship necessary, but I was able to kind of move forward with that individual, and I haven't heard it since. But it was one of those things where it's like, I feel like in that instance, it was conflict only because it was uncomfortable. Like, it's never usually comfortable, like to talk to somebody about something you disagree with them about. But I felt like I had to say it.
Yeah.
I had to say it, and I had to do it. And it wasn't about, and like you said, it wasn't about like a winner or a loser in that. It was about like, okay, we have to come to a better place. You know, you feel this way, I feel this way, but it's like, I'm right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what you're reminding me is like all the different ways that people can come into a conversation, right? Like people can avoid conflict, or people can want to collaborate when they're having a conflict. Yeah, some people might like be agreeable even though they don't mean to agree. You know, they're conflict avoidant, so they don't want to, right? And so I think that's part of one of the difficulties of having hard conversations, is that you don't know how the other person's going to react. And you know, and if you're a caring person or an empathetic person, it's hard to have that like a hard reaction from someone.
Is it fair to say that all conflict is not bad? It's just how you approach it?
I don't see why that's not fair.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, conflict isn't inherently bad, right? Like, I mean, one of the things there's a lot in like relational scholarship, like relationship like research is that conflict is good.
Uh-huh.
Like we talk about, for example, rupture repair. So rupture is like you have a rupture in a relationship, so there's some conflict, and then you repair that,
Uh-huh.
right? And if you can repair that, that deepens the relationship.
Absolutely.
I think some of the things that I have to accept sometimes is that, like, sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. you know um
It's
Sometimes you might not get the outcome you want, and that's fine.
it's those
Yeah.
experiences for
Mhm.
me that have built character in me. It's helped me to become this strong, amazing Black woman that I am before you.
Here, here. So we have 10 minutes left, and I wanted to talk about maybe some ways that we've handled conflict, and
We have a comment.
ways that we've handled. Yes, I see that. Ways that we've handled conflict that have been successful, and maybe some tools that we can talk about. But before that, we have a comment. Thank you for your show, guys. You're so very welcome. I think, Jaylon, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. Thank you, Di. Thank you, Jaylon. Yeah, it goes back to, is it kind? Does it need to be said now? Does it need to be said by me?
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
that's the one that's tough. I used to say it just because I could say it, and it doesn't always. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some things that have worked for you in conflict? Like, what have led to like good outcomes, or things that you felt particularly good about?
Well, I think that when I think the times when I've been able to think before I act,
Mm-hmm.
meaning like I'm feeling a certain way about someone or something that they have done, and I will, and it's not taking a poll, but I will speak to someone that I trust
Mm-hmm.
to find out if this is not my stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like when someone acts a certain way in a meeting and you don't like it. I'm all, is this me? What's going on? Should I say something, or should I, this is probably the most effective, but obviously you can't always do that because, um, uh, when you open your mouth and stick my foot in it. Um, yeah, I think that's probably like for me the most effective.
Yeah, what's interesting about what you're saying is it's reminding me of a bad habit that I have.
Mhm.
So I'm not conflict avoidant. What I am avoidant of is going from 0 to 100. So what will happen oftentimes is, like, I'll just take the L sometimes. Like, if I'm in a conversation with someone and I'll just take the L. I'll just, you know what, I'm just going to assume I'm wrong. The problem with that, though, is that that's not honest,
Yeah, no.
right? Like, if I have some stake or something that needs to be said, it's okay to bring that up. But for me, and this is about like underlying feelings, for me, I'm always afraid of going too far.
Yeah.
Like, because that was definitely a bad habit I had when I was drinking and using, is that, like, don't tell me I'm wrong, you know? um and so it's just reminding me of a way that sometimes maybe other people overcorrect, is like they just, in order to, they'll just assume, you know what, I am wrong.
Yeah.
And if a person has, like, comes from a history of like abuse or something like that, where it was too risky to have an opinion, like, then they might concede where they don't mean to.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just thinking about like some conflicts that have worked for me. I think, well, so there's some stuff I think that works. I think one of the things is, like, when I am talking to a loved one, I can't help but listen so closely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm always thinking about is, like, what is this person going through right now? Right. So, yeah, like, if, for example, someone's yelling or they're upset, like, my first default setting is, like, I'm not really listening to what's being said, but I'm, like, observing, like, wait a minute, how is this person feeling? Like, they're angry, they're sad, or and I try to acknowledge that. It's like, maybe one of the best things that I've learned to do and feel is, like, if I'm talking to someone I care about, you know what, like, it really doesn't matter if I agree or disagree with you.
Mhm.
It doesn't really matter if I understand where you're coming from. For me, it's more important, like, this is someone I love, and they're uncomfortable right now,
Mhm.
or they're sad, or they're angry.
Yeah.
Like, how can we talk about that? Like, how can we address that?
Yeah.
Um but that also assumes that I myself, if that I'm not being triggered, because that's really hard, right? Like if you have two people who are like, they're charged, it's going to be really hard for them to have a conversation. And that's where you develop other tools, right? Like one of the things like that we did in our Sober Solution Sundays thing, one of the tools that I have is like the second I feel myself starting to get activated, like on my best days, I'll say, you know what? I can't do this right. Like I can't have this conversation. We can have this later. I just can't do it right now.
Yeah.
I can't do this right now. Yeah. We have 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I think that especially when you're unable to, or it's kind of like I was saying, it's like if I can step away and maybe come back to it. And I think that I've had many situations where I'm all, you know what, I'm just gonna go because I might say something and then we can go, hopefully come back and work through it.
Right. Right. I was thinking too about some of the things that might get really confusing and hard to decipher when you're feeling triggered, for example, is like when you're feeling triggered, it's really hard to be able to distinguish, like to separate what's fact and what's an assumption you're being made, that's being made, right? So you can be listening to someone, but because you're so charged, you're reacting to something that maybe wasn't said. You just made an assumption based on what was said, right? And so, I mean, the takeaway is what I'm advocating for is like, if you're feeling particularly like tense, you're probably not going to think clearly. And so it's more likely that you're going to fall into making things harder than they need to be, or harder than they need to feel. Any kind of other thoughts before we close out?
Well, there, you know how some people try to avoid conflict,
right?
There's certain situations that you have to address. Like I think you had talked about is like not holding on to stuff so long that it becomes something that you can't control or that you can't work through. And I feel like this is something I was talking to my sponsor today. It's like I have this tendency to minimize and not look at how a situation or what someone has done has affected me. And instead of, obviously give it a little time, but instead of addressing it, I just shove it under the carpet and let it build up, and then it becomes something more, especially because I'm the queen of silent scorn and all of those things that, I don't know, this might be another show.
Yeah.
It might be another show.
I mean, I hear you. And I also appreciate like silent scorn. I think, silent scorn is, I think that is it's a way of like protecting oneself, I've definitely been on the receiving end of that before. And I can tell you, not of your silent scorn, but of other people. And I can tell you it feels no worse than if you were actually yelling at me, silent scorn is just as bad as like a more active scorn.
Yeah.
So with that, we should probably start closing out.
The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Yes, and our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
You can find more information, including all the ways to contact us at www.castrocountryclub.org/podcast.
And tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.